Hello, everyone. I'm Brooks Rayford, CEO of NC Tech, and welcome to this briefing on the release of our quarterly leadership poll. Building off some spot polling that we did during the early months of COVID, we launched in 2022 a quarterly poll that asks some consistent questions about general business environment and sentiment on issues like hiring, growth, and so forth, as well as some questions that might rotate in or out based on current events or issues. The first quarterly poll for 2024 was conducted during the last week in March, and we are releasing the results today. You'll find this on our website at nctech.org/pulse. We polled nearly 400 people and had a 36% response rate. The respondents are members of the NC Tech Board of Directors, Board of Advisors, CEOs of North Carolina-based tech companies, and leaders of large tech hubs or sites in North Carolina, but that are not headquartered here. Our sponsoring partner from the inception of these polls has been the Stearns Financial Group. Their founder, Dennis Stearns, serves on the NC Tech Board of Advisors and normally joins me for these briefings, but is on a family vacation this week. So I'll walk through the results and highlight some areas where we've seen some shifts in sentiment or activities from the last quarterly poll. Alex on our team is going to move us through slides, so Alex, we'll get started. First, we have a few demographic questions just to give you a flavor of the makeup of those who responded. You can see here the range of number of North Carolina-based employees in your organization, and you'll see that most of our just over half of our respondents have fewer than 100 employees in North Carolina, and most of those are 1 to 10, so really skews small in that grouping. And then there's another sizable chunk in the 100 to 500 and 1,000 plus. So with some of our larger companies are probably disproportionately represented in terms of the makeup of overall business size in North Carolina and even within our own members. But this gives you a flavor of that mix. Next. Of the responding participants, about 2/3 of their organizations are headquartered here. That actually corresponds with our overall membership. We have about 700 member companies and organizations within our membership, and about 2/3 of them are headquartered here. So this is reflective of that. Next. This reflects people's role. It leans toward executives. We do allow multiple selections here, so the numbers add up to just over 100%, but clearly C-suite is dominant. Next. Now we get into the sentiment questions. We ask, how do you perceive the past quarter has been for North Carolina's technology sector broadly? So we're not asking about their own company. We get to that next. This is about what's their perception of the sector's performance over the past quarter. You can see that terrible is tiny, slightly disappointing, about 12%. Okay is on par with good, similar numbers there. That's the bulk. And then a small percentage say great. When we look back at how that compares or contrasts to previous quarters, the terrible number has been consistently 1%, give or take. So that's been very consistent dating back to Q1 of 2023. The slightly disappointing did go up about 3 points from last time, but it's on par with every quarter before that. So 12 has been right on the money since Q1 of last year. OK has also been very consistent. Actually, it's the highest it's been. OK is right at 43 when rounding. It has ranged from 33 to 42 over the past several quarters, but leaning toward this higher end in recent quarters. Good has held its own pretty much. It's a slight dip from last quarter, but it's always been in the low to mid 40s. And then great has hovered in the 3 to 6 range and obviously pulls from other segments here or there, but no great shifts in this overall chart. Next. Now we do ask about their own organizations, people's perception of their own company or institution. And you'll see here, terrible still is a very small number, slightly disappointing, about 16. That's a tick up from last quarter, but on par with all previous quarters. It has ranged about 15 to 17 most every quarter. Good is at the highest it has been in the past year at 51. Great is the lowest it's been at 11. It has been as high as 17 or 19. So I think some of the great has shifted into good And that's been probably the main difference between the most recent quarter and the past year. What's interesting here is that good and great combined come to 62% in terms of how people feel their own organization did. But it's only 45% that are good and great when asked about their perception of the sector. This continues a phenomenon that has persisted throughout this polling, which is people's perception of their own entity is better than their perception of the industry. And this has been true every time we've done the poll, and it's not a small gap. It's actually fairly pronounced. So that continues, that trend continues. Next. Now we look in the future, we ask about, I expect that over the next quarter, our business will decline, stay the same, or grow. And you can see here that stay the same is about 22%. Grow is a very robust 76%. Decline, again, is very tiny. This chart has remained very consistent, maybe 1 point up or down in each of these over the course of the past year. So the takeaway here is the tech sector, or the tech dominant sector, seems to be pretty optimistic about the near term business climate and has remained that way as long as we've been doing this polling. Next. Here we ask about hiring. A lot in the news about employment. Unemployment remains very low. It's very low in the tech sector. I believe the latest federal number was around 3.7% overall. The tech sector tends to run about half of that. The last I saw was about 2.2%. So it's a very healthy sector from an employment standpoint, despite some of the headlines that we see. So about almost 5% are reducing headcount. 31% are holding steady, but 64% are hiring. This is, again, fairly consistent. The reducing headcount had been hovering in the 2 to 4% range in the past. And you can see here that it's in that same range now, a little bit higher. And the not hiring has remained very steady in the low 30s. And the hiring has, again, been fairly consistent in the mid 60s. Next. Here we have two questions that are, we always invite people to submit suggested questions for the next quarterly poll, and we swap those out. There was a lot of interest in this year, in this quarterly poll, knowing that the primaries would be over in early March, about people's perception around the upcoming elections, particularly in North Carolina. So the longer question here, which provides some context, is the primaries are over and nominees are now in place for elections this November. Regarding North Carolina races, the North Carolina Chamber took the unusual step recently of issuing a statement expressing a warning about the negative impact that some nominees who won their primaries in March might have on North Carolina's business success climate if they were to be elected. So the question is, are you concerned? Are you not concerned? Or are you unsure? And concerned is over 50%. And of course, that is not all because of one side or the other. People on both sides might be concerned about someone on the other side, but it's interesting that over half express some concern about the impact of who gets elected in statewide races on North Carolina's perception as a good place to come and do business. Not concerned is about a quarter of the respondents, and then similarly, almost a quarter are unsure. Next. The other question, again, not scientific, but if the election for governor were held today, for whom would you vote? Mark Robinson is the Republican nominee. He is the current lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and he came in at 20%. Josh Stein is the Democratic nominee. He's the current attorney general, came in at almost 36%. Mike Ross, Libertarian, just under 1%. None of these, just over 1%. And very large, the winner is undecided. So there's still a lot of persuasion still to be done. This does track with some of the public polling. It shows a smaller gap between the two major party nominees, but it does show a very large undecided block. And that is driven by some of the more scientific polling. One of the takeaways from their questioning is that people don't really feel like they know a lot about the two major party candidates, even though both of them are statewide office holders and are in the news quite a bit. So it will be interesting to see how the next few months shrinks the undecided pool and where those people might go. So next. We then asked some open-ended questions, and what you see here are the phrases or terms that showed up most commonly. What makes you optimistic about the next 12 months? Job market was interesting. Interest rates coming down, which does seem to be the trend that's on tap. Economic growth, which continues to be robust. Business growth. Election year, new leadership. Again, people can have different perspectives on who they want, but there's optimism there from many, or hopefulness. What we're seeing here too is market stability, sales growth, business climate. These are all things that people seem optimistic about. And that has been fairly consistent in recent months. During COVID, of course, and even in the early aftermath, those words didn't show up so much on this chart or this page. They showed up more on the next page, which is we can move to now. What are you concerned about over the next 12 months? And interestingly, you see some of the same things. Interest rates show up again, but more about the election, political uncertainty, cybersecurity, global political issues as well as local, and talent pipeline. Talent tends to show up sometimes on this chart and sometimes on the optimistic chart, but I think headlines sometimes paint a picture in people's minds. You saw evidence of that in the poll about how people view their own company versus how they view the broader industry in terms of how they're doing. And I think that's probably the end of our content slides. Is that right? Yep. So you go to nctech.org/pulse. You'll be able to, once we edit this recording and get it posted today, you'll be able to see these slides as well as a recording of this. You're welcome to share it. We encourage that. I want to thank again the Stearns Financial Group for sponsoring this series, and we look forward to seeing you next quarter. For now, thanks for viewing, and we'll see you next time.